Welcome back. Now, the Portfolio Committee on Tourism wants the proposed R1 billion Spurs sponsorship cancelled. It also wants an investigation into the proposed deal. The issue caused widespread outrage in the country. So let's find out if there's been any reaction from the British club. We're joined by our UK correspondent, Ollie Barrett. Ollie, we heard yesterday that the Portfolio Committee on Tourism in our parliament here in South Africa has told SA Tourism to actually squash the deal. Has the team heard about this?
Well, I'm sure the team will have heard about it. The Tottenham Hotspur side is not making any public comment, still holding that previous line for now, at least, that the club doesn't comment on commercial matters. I mean, we know that an announcement was due to be fairly close between SA Tourism and Tottenham Hotspur, so there was the plan at Spurs to make a public announcement in the not too distant future. But for now, no, nothing coming from the club. You have to assume that not only is Spurs watching relatively closely what is happening in South Africa with regards to the conversations about this deal, but also therefore, as a result, wondering about exactly what comes next. I was certainly hearing from sources close to the deal last week that they still hoped and expected that it was going to go ahead. If I can detect any shift this week, it is just a bit less optimism, a bit less bullishness about what comes next, and that is clearly related to some of the public statements being made in South Africa by the spokesperson for the presidency, for example, and those developments that you mentioned from yesterday too. I think you have to assume that the deal, given political developments in South Africa, is now less likely to go ahead than was otherwise the case, just as recently as last week. But in terms of public comments from Spurs, nothing.
And Ollie, looking at the fact that during the same week, I'm sure you've seen the footage of the CEO, the acting CEO of SA Tourism, receiving that deal from Manchester United. You actually mentioned before this started doing the rounds that you spoke to Manchester United, and they were saying that they would be willing to work with our country. Something like this, and I wonder what your opinion is, something like this and what's been happening around this deal and the fact that there was a leak, etc., does it have the potential to ruin future deals with any other club in the UK? Will it turn off the people who would possibly give us business this side?
I think there are a couple of ways of looking at that. One is that, yes, some clubs will see the difficulties that the SA Tourism plan has got into domestically and wonder whether that is the type of deal that they might want to pursue in a similar way or not. But then, of course, that so-called proposal that came from Manchester United, that video you've mentioned, that tweet that came from SA Tourism's COO with a photograph of that so-called proposal, you wonder whether that also demonstrates the other side of the coin, which is that potentially there might be clubs looking on, wondering whether if the Spurs deal goes under, that presents them with an opportunity. As you say, when we started to hear from SA Tourism that there was this so-called potential proposal from Manchester United, it was me that put that to the club, and they came back, Manchester United, saying they didn't want to comment too much in detail on commercial matters, but that it wouldn't be unusual, was how they described it, for material like this to be sent to what they described as prospective partners. So certainly at that point, Man United were still describing South Africa and potentially SA Tourism as a prospective partner. But yeah, I'm sure it's not just Spurs that'll be looking on at developments in South Africa. It's potentially other clubs and other sporting entities and other businesses and sections of the tourism industry here in the UK as well.
Has this, garnered any reaction from Spurs in terms of the fact that the acting CEO acted the way that he did? A lot of South Africans reacting on social media, for instance, that he was very rude, bullyish to some extent. Yesterday, he actually apologized to the Portfolio Committee of Tourism in Parliament. And I wonder if, what are the thoughts in the UK about his address? I'm sure, I remember you were listening to it with us last week.
Yeah, I was listening to it, and it was fairly robust. And I think absolutely it is the case that Spurs will have been keeping an eye on that particular press conference and, as I say, all of the political developments in South Africa, because you would if you were heading into a prospective £40 million or so, 1 billion rand nearly deal with an entity linked to a state government. You would absolutely be watching how those things were unfolding, the comments that were being made by SA Tourism, but also by politicians who've expressed cynicism and scepticism about the deal. That would just simply be due diligence. In terms of football fans here in the UK, there has been, as you can expect, some ribbing between Arsenal fans and Spurs fans about whether Spurs are going to be able to get their deal done in the same way that Arsenal got their deal done with Rwanda or not, and then lots of ribbing as well about whether Spurs are such an attractive prospect as Arsenal these days, given where they both lie in the Premier League table at the moment. That said, the game at the weekend on Sunday at Spurs, which was going to be the game at which South African officials could potentially be celebrating having done a deal with Spurs, that of course saw Spurs beating Manchester City, and so those Spurs fans at the moment have a little bit more bravado, shall we say, in that particular conversation.
Yeah, that was quite a very funny coincidence for us here in South Africa. We called it SA Tourism beating Manchester City during that particular game. Thank you very much for speaking to us, Ollie. This garnered even the president to write a statement around wanting an explanation from the Minister of Tourism here in South Africa. And I just wondered how reaction is going in the UK. But we'll hear from you if there is an announcement that is due by Tottenham Hotspur. Ollie Barrett, live for us in the UK. Thank you. Let's leave it there for now.